In the small, unassuming town of Pine Hollow, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, a chilling legend lingered in the air, wrapped in the whispers of its residents. For decades, the townsfolk spoke of the Gray Woman, a ghostly figure said to roam the abandoned streets, seeking something lost. The tale began in the early 1900s, when a young woman named Eliza had fallen in love with a local miner. Their romance blossomed amidst the backdrop of coal dust and midnight bonfires. But one fateful night, as Eliza waited for him at the edge of the woods, a terrible accident claimed his life. Heartbroken and consumed by grief, she wandered into the forest, her cries echoing like a mournful lullaby. Eliza was never seen again, but her spirit was said to walk the town each year on the anniversary of her lover's death. Many claimed to have glimpsed her a figure in a tattered gray dress, her face obscured by shadows, eyes hollow yet pleading. Some said she sought vengeance, while others believed she was simply searching for her lost love. As years passed, Pine Hollow grew quieter, the streets cracked and overgrown. Few dared to venture out at night, especially as the anniversary approached. One October evening, a group of adventurous teens, fueled by bravado and tales of the Gray Woman, decided to test their courage. They gathered flashlights and set off to the old mine where Eliza's lover had met his end, convinced they would catch a glimpse of the ghost. The mine loomed before them, a gaping maw of darkness. As they descended into the cool, damp air, laughter turned to nervous chatter. The sound of dripping water echoed around them, and shadows danced on the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. They reached a large chamber, where the flickering lights revealed remnants of mining tools, forgotten and rusting. Suddenly, a low, mournful wail resonated through the air. The group fell silent, hearts racing. One of them, Sarah, suggested they split up to cover more ground, a decision that was met with hesitance but ultimately agreed upon. They dispersed, flashlights cutting through the dark like fragile blades. As Sarah ventured deeper into the mine, she felt an inexplicable chill, as if unseen eyes were watching her. Her light flickered, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure at the far end of the tunnel. The familiar outline of a woman in gray sent a shiver down her spine. "Is someone there?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer. With every step, the air grew thicker, heavier, as if the darkness itself was alive. The shadows around her began to twist and ripple. She turned back, ready to retrace her steps, but the tunnel seemed to stretch infinitely, disorienting her. In her panic, she stumbled upon a small alcove. There, nestled among the rubble, lay a locket ornate and shimmering in the beam of her flashlight. Curiosity overpowered her fear, and she reached for it. As her fingers brushed the cool metal, a sudden gust of wind blew through the tunnel, extinguishing her light. Plunged into darkness, Sarah's breath quickened. She felt a presence close by, and the air grew colder still. She could hear the sound of soft weeping, like a distant echo. "Please, find me." The voice murmured, sorrowful and desperate. Heart pounding, Sarah fumbled for her phone, illuminating the space just enough to see. The figure materialized, closer now, her gray dress tattered and stained, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Help me," Eliza whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. Frozen with fear, Sarah found herself unable to respond. In that instant, the weight of grief and longing enveloped her like a shroud. The ghost's face twisted in agony, and Sarah felt a surge of empathy wash over her. I'm sorry," she stammered. Eliza's wail pierced the silence, echoing through the cavern as shadows closed in around Sarah. The locket slipped from her grasp, rolling away into the darkness. And in that moment, she realized the Gray Woman was not a vengeful spirit but a lost soul, forever trapped between worlds, seeking closure. In a desperate bid for escape, Sarah turned and ran, the echoes of Eliza's cries fading behind her. She burst into the open air, gasping, heart racing. But the forest seemed alive, branches twisting as if reaching for her. The next day, the townsfolk discovered Sarah, pale and shaken, her voice barely a whisper as she recounted the night's events. The locket, she explained, was still lost in the mine, and it became clear to them that Eliza's sorrow had not been laid to rest. Years passed, and Sarah's tale became part of Pine Hollow's lore. On the anniversary of Eliza's lover's death, the townsfolk would leave flowers at the mine's entrance, a tribute to the gray woman's unending search. Some said they still caught glimpses of her figure, watching from the shadows, her sorrow lingering like a ghostly fog, a reminder that some hearts never truly heal. As the years rolled on, the legend of the gray woman deepened its roots in Pine Hollow. The townspeople began to notice strange occurrences leading up to the anniversary of Eliza's disappearance. Pets would grow agitated, and children would speak of shadows dancing at the edge of their vision. Some claimed to hear whispers in the wind, echoing through the trees as if Eliza were calling out for help. Sarah, now a local high school teacher, found herself drawn back to the mine every October. The memory of that night haunted her dreams, and she felt a strange compulsion to uncover the truth behind Eliza's sorrow. With each visit, she hoped to find the lost locket and bring peace to the restless spirit. However, fear held her back, and she never ventured alone. One brisk autumn evening, Sarah gathered a small group of her students, intrigued by the tale of the gray woman. They were eager for adventure, fueled by a mix of thrill and skepticism. Together, they set off toward the mine, flashlights in hand, a sense of camaraderie igniting their courage. As they approached the mine, an oppressive silence fell over them, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, elongating toward the entrance as if beckoning them inside. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine but pressed on, determined to confront the past. Inside the mine, the air turned stale and cool. The group's laughter faded, replaced by the sound of dripping water and the distant echo of their footsteps. Sarah led them to the large chamber where she had encountered Eliza, her heart pounding as they stepped into the darkness. "Okay, everyone," she said, trying to maintain a brave face. "Let's split up and look for the locket. Just keep your flashlights on and stay within earshot." They dispersed, their beams of light cutting through the darkness. Sarah felt a strange pull toward the far end of the chamber, where the shadows seemed to coalesce. It was there she spotted a flicker of something shiny on the ground, a glint of metal. Rushing toward it, she knelt and picked up the locket, its surface engraved with intricate designs. As she held it in her palm, a rush of energy surged through her, almost as if the locket were alive. The air thickened, and a low hum vibrated in her chest. A memory flooded her mind. A vision of Eliza standing by the edge of the woods, tears streaming down her face, her heart aching with loss. "Sarah," one of her students, Jake, called from the other side of the chamber. "You have to see this." Sarah rushed over to where Jake stood, his flashlight illuminating a wall that appeared to shift and shimmer. As they approached, the wall seemed to breathe, revealing faint outlines of figures miners in their work attire, frozen in a moment of despair. Their faces were etched with fear, mouths open in silent screams, as if trapped in a loop of horror. "Are those the miners?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, his expression a mix of fascination and fear. "What happened to them?" Before she could respond, the chamber plunged into darkness. The lights flickered, and the ground shook slightly, a low rumble echoing through the mine. Panic erupted among the students as they scrambled to turn their flashlights back on. "Stay calm. Everyone stay together," Sarah shouted, her voice barely carrying over the growing noise. But then, amidst the chaos, they heard a soft, haunting melody, drifting through the air. It was the same lullaby Sarah had heard in her dreams, a mournful tune that wrapped around her like a shroud. She felt a tug at her heart, and instinctively, she began to follow the sound deeper into the mine. "Where are you going?" Jake yelled, but Sarah couldn't stop. The music seemed to call to her, urging her onward, as if it were guiding her to a truth she had yet to uncover. As she moved deeper, the melody grew louder, accompanied by the distant sound of crying. Shadows began to twist and swirl around her, forming shapes that felt eerily familiar. She could almost see Eliza, her gray dress billowing like smoke, beckoning Sarah to come closer. "Help me?" The voice echoed, growing clearer. "Find him, please." With every step, the atmosphere thickened, almost suffocating her. The locket pulsed in her hand, its energy drawing her toward a small alcove hidden behind a rock formation. There, illuminated by a faint glow, lay a small wooden box, its lid intricately carved. Sarah's breath hitched as she reached for it. As she opened the box, an overwhelming wave of sorrow washed over her, nearly bringing her to her knees. Inside, she found a weathered letter, its ink faded but still legible. It was a love letter from Eliza to her miner, filled with promises and dreams for a future that would never come. In that moment, everything shifted. The shadows around her coalesced into the shape of Eliza, her features sorrowful yet yearning. "You found it," the ghost whispered, her voice laced with both relief and despair. "But it's not enough. You must understand." The ground trembled again, and Sarah's heart raced. "What do you mean? How can I help?" Eliza's apparition flickered, revealing glimpses of the past, the miners, the accident, the chaos that had unfolded. Sarah saw the moments that had trapped them all in this haunting cycle of grief. Eliza's pain intertwined with theirs, binding her spirit to the mine. "Release us," Eliza pleaded. "You must finish the story." As the shadows danced wildly around her, Sarah realized the locket was a key, but not just to Eliza's heart. It was a link to the memories of the miners, to their unfinished lives. With the letter in hand, Sarah understood she had to share their story, to tell Pine Hollow what had happened all those years ago. But just as she made that resolution, a violent force surged through the mine, throwing her backward. The world around her spun, and she lost her grip on the locket. It clattered to the ground, the sound echoing ominously. "Sarah!" Jake's voice pierced through the chaos, pulling her back to reality. She felt hands grasping her, pulling her toward safety. But a sense of urgency gripped her. She had to retrieve the locket, to finish what she had started. "I can't leave it," she cried, fighting against Jake's hold. "It's too dangerous. We have to get out," he urged, his eyes wide with fear. But the shadows were rising, swirling like a storm, and Eliza's figure was growing faint. "You must remember," the ghost cried, her voice dissolving into the tumult. In a split second, Sarah made her choice. She broke free from Jake's grasp, diving toward the locket, her heart racing. The shadows surged forward, threatening to engulf her, but she clutched the locket tightly. The world around her darkened, and she closed her eyes, focusing on Eliza's sorrow, the stories of the miners, the dreams that had been shattered. As she whispered the words from the letter, a light erupted from the locket, illuminating the mine. "Let them go," Sarah shouted, her voice strong and resolute. "You are not forgotten." With that proclamation, the shadows recoiled, swirling violently before bursting apart like a wave crashing against the shore. The mine trembled, and for a fleeting moment, Sarah felt a wave of peace wash over her. The cries and the sorrow began to fade, and in their place, a soft glow enveloped her. When the light dimmed, Sarah found herself standing in the mine, the locket warm in her hand, but the oppressive presence was gone. Eliza's figure stood before her, a serene smile illuminating her face. "Thank you," the ghost whispered, her voice now a gentle breeze. "You've freed us all." As Eliza faded into the light, Sarah felt a weight lift from her heart. The memories of the miners and Eliza intertwined in her mind, their stories no longer shackled to the past. She had uncovered the truth and promised to share it. But just as she turned to leave, she noticed something peculiar in the corner of her eye, a new shadow forming, darker and more menacing than the rest. It loomed closer, and an unsettling chill swept through the mine once more. "Sarah!" Jake called out, but she couldn't move, drawn to the darkness that whispered secrets of another sorrow yet to be resolved. The mine wasn't finished with her. Not yet. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. As the last vestiges of Eliza's spirit dissipated, Sarah felt a new, malevolent presence lurking in the corners of the mine. The oppressive chill wrapped around her like a vice, and she turned to see a shadow forming, darker than the others, pulsating with an energy that felt utterly wrong. "Jake!" she shouted, panic rising in her chest. "We need to get out now." But the shadow seemed to whisper, curling around her, pulling her closer with an unseen force. It was a deeper darkness, a void that exuded anger and despair, as if it had been born from the very pain that had once engulfed Eliza. The air crackled with tension, and she realized this was not just a remnant of the past, it was something more sinister. "Stay together," Jake urged, grabbing Sarah's arm. He tugged her back toward the mine's entrance, but the shadow pulsed, growing stronger with each heartbeat. The walls of the mine began to tremble again, and the haunting melody morphed into a dissonant wail, echoing through the tunnels. "Why won't it let us leave?" Sarah gasped, her heart racing as she struggled against the weight of the shadow. "What does it want?" Jake's face paled, and he glanced nervously around the chamber. "Maybe it's connected to the miners or Eliza's lover. It could be their pain manifesting." The shadows shifted, twisting as if they were forming into recognizable shapes. Miners, their faces twisted in anguish, trapped in an eternal cycle of grief. One figure stood out among them, a man with a miner's cap, eyes filled with rage and sorrow. It was Eliza's lover, the one she had waited for that fateful night. "Release us!" the shadowy figure cried, his voice a haunting echo. "You've freed her, but the rest of us are bound by our torment." The other shadows began to swirl around him, joining his cries. Their voices melded into a cacophony of despair, drowning out all rational thought. Sarah felt the weight of their grief bearing down on her, each sorrowful story coiling around her heart like a vice. "We can't leave them," she shouted, torn between fear and compassion. "They deserve to be free." Jake's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you crazy? We need to get out of here before it consumes us." But as she looked at the tortured faces, Sarah knew she couldn't turn her back on their suffering. "I have to help them. They're trapped in this pain, just like Eliza was." Before Jake could respond, Sarah took a step forward, the locket pulsing against her chest. "Listen to me," she cried, her voice ringing out amidst the wailing shadows. "I can hear your stories. You're not forgotten." The shadows seemed to still for a moment, their anguished cries quieting, as if they were listening. Taking a deep breath, Sarah continued, "I'll tell your story. I promise to share what happened, to make sure people remember you." Suddenly, the miner's shadow lunged forward, the anger in his gaze piercing through the darkness. "You think words will free us?" he growled. "We need closure. We need justice." Sarah's heart raced. She could feel the weight of his pain, the unresolved anger that had kept him trapped in this limbo. "What do you need from me?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "Find the truth," he said, his voice low and menacing. "The accident, find out what really happened. Someone was to blame, and until that truth is revealed, we cannot rest." The shadows swirled around her, their whispers intensifying, drowning her in a whirlwind of sorrow and rage. "You must dig deeper. Reveal the dark secrets buried within Pine Hollow." "Sarah, this is insane," Jake shouted, panic rising again. "We need to go now." But the shadows were relentless, their energy weaving a web around her. Sarah closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she felt with them, the bond forged in shared pain. "I will find the truth," she vowed. "I will honor your stories." As the words left her lips, a brilliant light erupted from the locket, illuminating the mine. The shadows recoiled momentarily, their cries turning from anger to something resembling hope. The miner's figure flickered, his eyes softening. "Do not forget us," he said, his voice now a whisper. "We'll be waiting." And just like that, the shadows began to fade, retreating into the depths of the mine. The chamber shook violently, as if the very ground were attempting to expel the darkness that had long lingered. Sarah turned to Jake, her heart racing. "We have to go," she shouted, sprinting toward the exit, dragging Jake along behind her. The tremors intensified, rocks and debris falling from the ceiling as they raced through the tunnel, the darkness clawing at their heels. Bursting into the fresh air, they stumbled outside, gasping for breath as the night enveloped them. The mine stood ominously behind them, its entrance shrouded in shadows, but the air felt different, lighter, somehow. "We did it," Jake panted, collapsing against a tree, his eyes wide with shock. "But what did we just unleash?" Sarah clutched the locket tightly, feeling its warmth in her palm. "I think we've only just begun. The shadows are still there, and their stories need to be told." As she looked back at the mine, she felt a sense of purpose igniting within her. The pain of the past had not vanished but rather transformed. The truth lay buried beneath years of silence, and it was now her mission to uncover it. "What's our next move?" Jake asked, still catching his breath. Sarah took a deep breath, determination settling in her bones. "We start digging into Pine Hollow's history. There has to be something about the miners, the accident. We need to find out who was responsible." Jake nodded, a mix of fear and resolve in his expression. "And if we find them, then we make sure the town knows the truth," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "We'll give them a voice." As they walked away from the mine, the shadows lingered in the periphery, a reminder that some stories were far from over. With the locket as a guide, Sarah felt the weight of the past resting on her shoulders, but also the strength to confront it. The town of Pine Hollow held secrets, and she was determined to unearth them all. The gray woman was only the beginning, and the shadows were waiting for someone brave enough to shed light on the darkness that had bound them for so long. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Jake delved into Pine Hollow's history, sifting through old records and newspaper articles at the town library. They spoke to longtime residents, unearthing forgotten tales of the miners, their families, and the tragic accident that had left so many in sorrow. The more they researched, the more the pieces began to fall into place. They discovered that the mine had been operating under questionable safety practices, and several reports had indicated that the owner had ignored warnings about structural weaknesses. It became clear that the community had been fed a narrative of negligence, one that obscured the truth of who was truly to blame. One night, while poring over a stack of dusty documents, Sarah stumbled upon an old letter addressed to the town council. It was from a former miner who had witnessed the events leading up to the accident. His account was filled with damning details about shortcuts taken, corners cut, and a desperate rush to maximize profits, all at the expense of safety. "This is it," Sarah exclaimed, her pulse quickening. "This letter could expose everything." Jake leaned closer, reading the lines that spoke of fear and urgency. "We have to bring this to the town meeting. If we present this evidence, we might finally get some answers." As the anniversary of Eliza's lover's death approached, the town buzzed with anticipation. Sarah and Jake prepared to share their findings, hoping to bring justice to the spirits that had been trapped for so long. On the night of the meeting, the community gathered in the old town hall, the air thick with tension and curiosity. When it was their turn to speak, Sarah stood before the crowd, clutching the letter and the locket. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "We have a story to tell, a story that has haunted Pine Hollow for over a century." As she recounted the tragic tale of Eliza, her lover, and the miners, the room was enveloped in a heavy silence. She felt the spirits of the lost surround her, their presence urging her on. The truth of what happened in the mine has been buried along with the memories of those who suffered. But we cannot ignore their cries any longer. With a trembling hand, she presented the letter, detailing the negligence that had led to the accident. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she read the words aloud, revealing the dark secrets that had long been shrouded in silence. Faces filled with shock and disbelief, the weight of history settling upon them. "What can we do?" an elder woman finally asked, her voice breaking the stillness. Sarah looked around, seeing the determination in their eyes. "We must honor their memories. We can petition for a memorial, a place where the stories of the miners and Eliza can be told. And we can hold the mine owners' descendants accountable for the neglect that caused this tragedy. Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. The townsfolk began to discuss how to take action, igniting a spark of hope that had long been extinguished. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. The spirits had been heard. As the meeting concluded, Sarah stepped outside into the crisp night air. She closed her eyes, holding the locket tightly against her chest. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of a lullaby melody of gratitude, a song of release. Jake joined her, a smile spreading across his face. "We did it, Sarah. We finally did it." But just as a sense of peace began to settle, a sudden chill swept through the air, causing her to shiver. The shadows that had lingered since their first encounter began to swirl at the edges of her vision. But this time, they felt different, not menacing, but relieved. "Do you see that?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Yes," Jake replied, his gaze fixed on the shifting shapes. "It's like they're fading?" Eliza's figure appeared before them, glowing softly, surrounded by the other miners. Their faces, once twisted with pain, now radiated serenity. "Thank you," Eliza whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze. "You've given us what we needed. The truth has been set free." As the figures began to dissolve into the night, Sarah felt a warmth envelop her, a sense of closure washing over the landscape. "Will you be at peace now?" she called out. "Yes," Eliza replied, her smile brighter than the stars. "We are finally free." With that, the shadows dissipated, leaving behind a quiet stillness, a sense of finality that resonated deep within Sarah's heart. She and Jake stood together, gazing up at the night sky, the weight of the past lifting, leaving only the promise of a new beginning. In the days that followed, Pine Hollow began to change. The community rallied together, creating a memorial for the miners and sharing their stories with pride. Sarah became a vital part of that movement, teaching her students about the town's history, ensuring that the tales of the Gray Woman and the miners would never be forgotten. And every year, as autumn leaves fell and the air turned crisp, the townsfolk would gather at the memorial to honor those lost, their voices raised in a chorus of remembrance. Eliza's lullaby would weave through the air, a melody of hope and healing, a testament to the power of truth and the unbreakable bond between the living and the lost. As for Sarah, she carried the locket with her always, a reminder of the shadows she had faced and the light they had uncovered together. Pine Hollow was no longer just a place of sorrow. It was a community of resilience, forever transformed by the echoes of its past. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.